The year is 1177. Jerusalem, the heart of the Crusader Kingdom, stands one mistake away from erasure. At its throne sits a boy, King Baldwin IV, 16 years old, ravaged by leprosy, a disease that attacks the nerves until the body forgets how to feel its own skin. His fingers tremble. His face is numbed by patches of dead flesh. He can hardly hold a cup, yet he must hold a kingdom. Across the southern horizon, another force rises. Saladin, the most powerful ruler in the Middle East, a man who has united Egypt, Syria, Arabia, marches north with 26,000 soldiers. Mamluk cavalry, Sudanese infantry, Turkish archers, an army forged from every corner of Islam, moving with one purpose: to crush Jerusalem and end the Crusader states forever. And Baldwin? He rides with 500 knights. Not 5,000, 500. No one expects a battle. They expect a funeral and a coronation for Saladin. But in the burning silence of the desert, under a sun that blisters armor and blinds eyes, the boy king makes a decision that should have been impossible. He will ride out to meet Saladin head-on. What follows is not the story of numbers, it's the story of nerve, of a teenager who should have been dying, becoming the spark that tears open the heart of an empire. Of a single charge, 500 men against 26,000, that turns the sands of Montgisard into a grave for arrogance itself. But to understand the miracle that followed, you have to understand the mask he wore. Imagine you're Baldwin, a crowned teenager wrapped in steel you barely feel. Leprosy numbs your fingers. Your joints burn without warning. Your skin flakes and splits under your armor. Some days your body feels like it's falling apart in quiet, humiliating pieces. Leprosy in the 11th century wasn't just a disease, it was a stigma. People feared it. Priests whispered about curses. Courtiers looked away when Baldwin's face began to change. And so the mask was made. Hammered silver, cold, expressionless. It covered the disfigurement on his cheeks. It hid what the disease was stealing. It turned a wounded boy into a reflective, untouchable icon. But the mask also meant something else. It told his army, "I will not hide. If you must see me, then see me shining." Your hands may lose their grip on reins. Your nerves may betray you. Your voice may crack from pain. But the army still looks to you. In the medieval world, a king's presence wasn't symbolic, it was structural. If the troops saw the king at the front, the line held. If he disappeared, the army dissolved. So Baldwin leaned on ritual. Priests lifted relics, tiny slivers of wood said to come from the true cross, the cross Jesus was crucified on. They chanted, steady and rhythmic, until fear bent into focus. This wasn't theater. It was how armies in the Middle Ages built courage. Inside, Baldwin was breaking. Outside, the silver mask shone like a banner. His advisors begged him to stay in Jerusalem, close the gates, hide behind stone walls, wait for help. But Baldwin knew a truth no number could hide. A king who hides teaches his people to shrink. A king who rides teaches them to stand. So Baldwin lifts the mask. He sets it over his ruined cheek. He steps into the sun. And in the glare, his men see not a patient, but a king. To see why this mattered, you have to understand the storm rolling toward him. Long before Baldwin sees a banner or hears a drum, the desert gives the first warning. A smear of dust across the southern sky, too broad for caravans, too deep for merchants, too steady for wind. The ground itself seems to hum beneath the weight of thousands of hooves. The air thickens with heat, blown forward by something vast enough to shape its own weather. This is not an army approaching, it is a continent on the move. Saladin's host enters the horizon in layers. First the dust, then a faint shimmer of metal, then shapes of men and horses bending in the heat, and finally the full reality. A force so large it seems to erase the distance it marches across. 26,000 under one ruler. More soldiers in one column than Jerusalem could scrape together from every fortress, farm, and monastery combined. And each part of that mass carries its own kind of danger. At its core ride the Mamluks, the elite cavalry, men trained since boyhood to live on horseback. Their bows are composite layers of wood and sinew, engineered to punch through armor even at high range. They can fire in a full gallop without losing accuracy. They can pivot formations on a breath. These are men who have never known a life without drills, who treat battle as a craft, not a gamble. Beside them, the Syrian heavy cavalry, nobles armored in lamella plates or chainmail shirts, carrying long lances and curved sabers. They're not as disciplined as the Mamluks, but they have pride, breeding, and centuries of tribal rivalries that make retreat feel worse than death. Surrounding these are the Turkic horse archers, light, fast, born to the steppe winds. They scout miles ahead, circling like hawks, loose arrows while retreating, lure enemies into traps, and vanish over dunes before you draw breath. They form the nervous system of the army, its eyes, its ears, its warning signs. Behind them stretches the broad, dusty sea of infantry, dozens of tribes and villages represented in one column, some armored, some barefoot, some carrying spears, others slings or javelins. Not elite, not uniform, but heavy enough in sheer number to smother resistance by weight alone. And then comes the part of the army most people never count, the part that makes a huge force dangerous: the support. Cooks, camel handlers, blacksmiths, physicians, imams, supply masters, water carriers, engineers, scribes, armorers, herds of pack animals groaning under crates of arrows and sacks of grain. Tents, coin, fodder, tools. An entire moving city that feeds the army, clothes it, repairs it, shelters it. It is this backbone, not just the fighters, that gives Saladin the confidence of a man who believes the land itself belongs to him. But what people praised as strength also carried the flaw Baldwin was counting on. Because a force this large does not march as one creature. It stretches like a rope pulled too tight. Horse archers drift miles ahead. Foragers slip sideways hunting grain and goats. Units shift to find water. The infantry plods at a slower rhythm. Camels lag, wagons jam. The gaps grow. The front does not always know what the middle is doing. The middle doesn't know where the rear has halted. And when a giant stretches across the desert, communication unravels. Commands shouted at the front are swallowed by wind before they reach the wings. Banners vanish behind dust clouds. A courier sent to find a captain might spend an hour just locating the right cluster of tents. Orders intended for the left wing reach the center instead. Warnings meant for the center arrive too late to matter. The larger the army becomes, the farther apart its thoughts drift. Confidence fills those gaps before discipline does. Saladin's men believe Jerusalem is already defeated. Why wouldn't they? Every fortress they passed fell without a fight. Patrols fled at the first sight of their banners. The Crusaders look thin, scattered, desperate. The road to the Holy City feels like a victory parade. So vigilance softens. Scouts ride lazily, more focused on heat and thirst than threats. Guards turn their attention to wells instead of horizons. Archers sit in the shade of their own shields. Looters break formation to grab whatever isn't nailed down. The desert notices. The desert keeps score. A thirsty army stretches farther. A stretched army moves slower. A slow army becomes predictable. And a predictable army becomes vulnerable. Especially at the center, where the baggage train churns the earth into dust, where carts creak and camels kneel stubbornly, where the officers feel safest and therefore least ready. The place Saladin assumes is strongest is, in truth, where the seams are loosest. A giant that wide cannot pivot. A giant that loud cannot hear. A giant that confident cannot imagine a knife aimed straight at its heart. And Baldwin watches all this unfold through the reports carried to him by exhausted scouts. The thinning lines, the drifting wings, the scattered foragers, the mass of pack animals clogging the road to the north. He sees an army strong everywhere except where it matters most, its ability to react. Because a vast host does not turn on a moment, it turns on an hour, sometimes on a day. And a force that needs a day cannot survive an enemy that strikes in a minute. So the boy king weighs his 500 riders not against 26,000 bodies, but against one weakness: the soft, swollen middle of a marching empire that no longer believes it can be hurt. He has no walls strong enough to wait behind. He has no fleet fast enough to save him. He has no time to stall, no reinforcements to expect, no miracle waiting in the wings. He only has speed. He only has surprise. He only has a single place where a giant can be made to fall. And he knows now, clear as the heat shimmering on the horizon, that his 500 do not need to defeat the whole of Saladin's army. They just need to break the moment when the whole army stops thinking. The mask cools on his face, his fingers tighten on the reins, and the decision settles in his chest like a blade turned point down. The only way to survive the storm is to ride straight into its eye. Saladin's net stretches across the desert like a living thing, and Baldwin sees the flaw, the looseness, the dangerous confidence in its weave. But seeing opportunity is not the same as acting on it, not when you command 500 and death rides on every decision. Inside Jerusalem's halls, fear gathers like smoke. Lords lean over maps. Numbers spill from their tongues like accusations. 26,000, 500. We cannot meet him in the open. These are not cowards. They are veterans of sieges, men who watched cities burn and armies drown in sand. And they beg their king, a sick boy hidden behind a silver mask, to choose safety. Their logic is sound. The walls of Jerusalem are thick and old. They have survived sieges before. A fortress multiplies strength. 500 becomes 5,000 when stone joins the fight. But Baldwin understands what the council cannot admit aloud. A siege is slow death. Food dwindles. Disease spreads. Hope thins until it snaps. Behind walls, time is the enemy. And worse, hiding would shatter the myth that keeps the kingdom standing. Baldwin may be frail, but the people believe God works through him. They believe his silver mask is not just a shield, but a sign. If he retreats behind stone, that belief cracks. Leaders in the medieval world ruled not only with armies, but with the illusion of inevitability. So Baldwin listens to his lords and quietly rejects their fear. He rides south to scout the terrain himself. Not far from the coastal road lies an open stretch of land called Montgisard, a plain cut by a low ridge flanked by tangled scrub and narrow tracks that squeeze marching columns into bottlenecks. It is here, Baldwin realizes, that Saladin's wide net becomes dangerously thin. It is here the largest host in the east must funnel into tight ground, blind to what waits beyond the ridge. The desert sun pounds the sand until the air shimmers. Camels groan. Baggage carts creak and halt. Water skins slosh empty. The march grows noisy, sloppy, distracted. This is not an army ready for battle. This is an army ready for plunder. Baldwin feels the moment tightening like a drawn bow. A slow retreat means starvation. A defensive siege means collapse. But a sudden strike, delivered at the perfect seam, could detonate the entire shape of Saladin's march. He calls his captains. The Templars gather, grim and silent. Hospitallers tighten their shields. 500 armored knights wait for the king's command. And Baldwin, sick, trembling, hidden behind a silver mask, speaks the simplest order of his reign. We ride. Because if the kingdom is to live, it must gamble everything, in one impossible blow. Dust swirls, wind shifts, the horizon quivers like hammered bronze. And out of that shimmering heat comes the most impossible sight Saladin's vanguard has ever witnessed. 500 armored knights forming a perfect wedge aimed straight at the heart of an army 50 times its size. This wedge isn't random, it's engineered. At its very tip, the Templars, elite shock cavalry, trained to ride as tight as stone walls. Behind them, Hospitallers, heavier, slower, brutal in close combat. Along the flanks, Jerusalem's lords and household knights, hardened by desert war. Crossbowmen jog ahead to harass the loose screens of Saladin's forward guard, then peel aside to let the hammer pass. To understand why this works, you need to understand medieval shock combat. A knight on a warhorse is a missile made of meat and metal. A lance is a spear the length of a tree. Momentum is everything. But momentum only matters if the formation holds. Baldwin gives 3 orders, just 3. Hold formation. Keep the cross before you. When we strike, do not stop. Simple words, simple enough to survive fear, dust, wind, and death. Then comes the moment. Saladin's army is scattered, picking fruit, filling water skins, cooking meals, raiding nearby farms. They expect an empty field, not a charging wall of steel, not a silver-masked king leading it. The thunder begins quietly, a tremor in the earth, hooves pounding, armor clattering, the hum of 500 lances slicing air. Then, impact. It hits like a stone dropped onto glass. The front line of Muslims, mostly unprepared light infantry, buckles instantly. The wedge punches through like a nail through cloth. Men scatter sideways. Banners tilt. Drums go silent in shock. Saladin's officers shout, scrambling to form ranks. But it's too late. The wedge bites deeper. Baldwin rides at the front, silver mask glinting, his weakened hands clenched around the reins. He is nearly blind with dust, nearly numb with pain. But he holds the line, and the line holds because he does. Templars slam into the center like a falling tower. Lances shatter, swords take their place. Horses scream. Sand erupts in waves of red and white. This isn't a battle. This is shock discipline. A single, perfectly timed strike aimed at the exact moment Saladin's massive army is most vulnerable. A blade into a seam, a needle into a knot, a hammer into a hollow. The center, the engine of Saladin's formation, cracks. A crack becomes a split becomes collapse. The impossible happens. 26,000 men begin to move backward. Not marched, not commanded, fleeing. And Baldwin's 500 ride deeper still. Because once the center breaks, the real killing begins. The moment the center breaks, the tone of the entire battlefield changes. Not the sound, the tone. The shift you can feel in your ribs before you hear it in your ears. The vast, coordinated hum of a great army dissolves into scattered, overlapping notes of panic. Baldwin sees it first. Not the bodies, not the dust cloud, the movement. A subtle but unmistakable tilt, the retreat instinct taking over 26,000 men who thought they were invincible. And he knows, now the killing begins. Not in the clash, in the run. To understand why, you have to imagine what a medieval army really looks like when it collapses. Formations don't pull back in neat ranks, they invert. The men in the back, who never saw the charge, assume the front is making way. They step forward, filling gaps. But when they see faces sprinting toward them in terror, brains freeze. Bodies collide. Lines buckle inward like cloth cinching around a fist. This is what Saladin's central column becomes, a 20,000-man traffic jam in plate, leather, silk, and heat, with a wedge of armored knights pushing into the bottleneck. At the wells, the only real water sources for miles, the crush becomes biblical. Horses lunge at the scent of water, riders yanking at reins to stop them. Men shove forward with empty skins. Camel lines buckle under the weight of bodies. A single overturned cart blocks the choke point, and suddenly 1,000 men have nowhere to go but sideways, into thorn, loose sand, and each other. The air fills with screams not of battle, but of suffocation. Armor becomes a coffin, thirst becomes a blade, and Baldwin's knights keep pressing, not wildly, not vengefully, but with precise brutality. Templars strike and peel away. Hospitallers drive wedges into pockets of resistance. Jerusalem's levies follow on foot, finishing what the cavalry breaks. Every few dozen yards, the pattern repeats. A knot of defenders tries to hold. The wedge hits. The knot snaps. The route widens. And with every break, panic spreads faster than steel. What destroys Saladin's army is not the sword, it's the mind. These men woke thinking the day would be easy, marching, looting, eating, not a pitched battle, not a desperate shock charge at full speed. Now, every shifting shadow looks like a flanking wave. Every shout sounds like doom. Every bottlenecked ramp of earth feels like a trap. Rumor does what arrows can't. The Sultan is dead. The Christians are everywhere. The right wing has collapsed. The wells are poisoned. They've surrounded us. Each lie multiplies, and multiplied lies are deadlier than knights. Saladin tries to regain control, but he can't reach his own center. His best troops are too far. His command signals vanish into dust. His cavalry is caught between fleeing infantry and charging knights. All he can do is choose which units to save, and even that is a choice he barely gets to make. Because by now, Baldwin's 500 do not look like 500. They look like inevitability, the kind of inevitability that snaps a general's instinct from command to survival. The rout becomes total. Horses outrun their own shadows. Camels break their tethers. Foot soldiers drop shields to run faster. Wounded men are trampled. Banners fall, trampled into dust. Arrows fly into the backs of the wrong men. Confusion sharpened into fratricide. And through all of it, Baldwin rides, silver mask gleaming, a ghost in the heat. He shouldn't even be alive. He shouldn't be upright on a horse. But he is. And for his men, that is enough to become more than they are. For Saladin's men, it is enough to become less. By nightfall, what's left of the great host staggers towards safety. Some collapse from heat. Some vanish into the desert. Some never leave the wells, and Saladin himself escapes with a fraction of the men he started with, alive, shaken, and horrified. He has been beaten before, but never like this, never by so few, never with fear doing more killing than steel. Montgisard becomes not just a defeat, but a wound, and Baldwin's victory, born from desperation and a gamble, echoes through the desert like a warning bell. Jerusalem erupts when the survivors return. Templars battered, Hospitallers bleeding, Baldwin barely conscious, but alive, triumphant, mythic. Church bells ring until ropes snap. Crowds surge into the streets. Mothers weep. Soldiers embrace strangers. For a moment, one impossible moment, the city believes the world has shifted. But beneath the jubilation lies a truth as sharp as any lance. A victory buys time, not salvation. Baldwin's army returns smaller than it left, horses exhausted, mail rings dented and broken, shields cracked, arrows spent. And the men who survived Montgisard, have the look soldiers get after witnessing the impossible. Not invincible, but aware of how thin the line truly is. Supplies are low, coin is low, forts are undermanned, caravans bring rumors of retaliation, merchants tighten purses instead of loosening them. A kingdom cannot live on stories alone. And Baldwin himself, the boy who led a charge that should have been suicide, returns diminished. Leprosy does not pause for legends. His joints stiffen, his eyesight blurs, his hands tremble longer each day, and every symptom he hides behind the mask grows heavier on the throne. His council, once galvanized, begins to fracture along old lines. Claims of credit, arguments over borders, questions about succession. Victory makes heroes. Victory does not make unity. Meanwhile, Saladin learns faster than anyone expected. Montgisard punches arrogance out of him. He tightens discipline, shortens marches, forges new lines of communication, reinforces the core of his army with soldiers who will not scatter if lightning strikes twice. He adapts. Because losing one battle can be a lesson. Losing two is a pattern. And Saladin refuses patterns. Baldwin sends letters across Europe, desperate for reinforcements, coin, ships, anything. Some hear the call, some don't. Most shrug off the urgency. Victories have a way of making allies slower, not faster. And Baldwin watches the sands slip through his fingers. Montgisard gave Jerusalem months, maybe years, but not a future, not a guarantee, not immunity from time. Yet despite all this, despite failing health, fracturing alliances, and a relentless enemy, one thing Montgisard gives Baldwin is a myth. A silver-masked boy king shattering an empire's march, a force of 500 piercing 26,000. A moment where courage outweighed numbers and conviction outweighed disease. That story, imperfect, exaggerated, unstoppable, spreads across ports, marketplaces, monasteries, and courts. And stories have gravity. A few knights arrive in the months that follow. A few ships bring grain. A few merchants gamble on hope. Not enough to win a war, but enough to keep a kingdom breathing. Montgisard was a hinge, not a door. A moment that turned the world slightly, just not far enough to change the ending. History rarely rewards boldness with permanence, but it often rewards it with possibility. Baldwin's charge at Montgisard didn't rewrite the map. It didn't save Jerusalem forever. It didn't break Saladin's rise, but it changed that day, and changing one day shifted the path of years. That is the rule, the one we can use. When the slow loss is guaranteed, the sharp risk becomes the only chance at victory. So here's the question that outlives Baldwin, outlives the Crusades, outlives every banner that fell in the desert. Where in your life is caution killing you slowly? And where does one bold strike at the exact right seam become the only sane choice? Drop your take in the comments, then subscribe for the next chapter, where we track how fear, rumor, and precision returns sharper on another field, under another sun. Montgisard didn't end the story, it ignited it.